Picture this. You wake up on what should be an ordinary weekday. You roll over, grab your phone, and check your bank balance like you always do. Only today the app doesn't open. It just spins, then flashes. Service temporarily unavailable. You try again. You switch from data to Wi-Fi. Same thing. Annoying, you think. Tech glitches happen. No big deal. You head out for coffee. The lights are on, music is playing, everything looks normal. You tap your card, the cashier shakes their head. Cards are down, cash only. The person in front of you is arguing. I have money, I literally have money. The cashier shrugs. If it won't run, it won't run. Now you're paying attention. You walk to the ATM. There's a paper sign on the screen. Out of service. Not low cash. Not come back later. Dead. You check the ATM across the street. Same sign. You open the app again. Now it doesn't even try to load. Unable to connect to institution. Your brain starts doing quiet math. Rent is due. You need gas. Groceries are low. You were supposed to send money to a family member today. You tell yourself it's still probably temporary. Some network outage, some cyber attack, some maintenance window nobody warned you about. Then you start noticing the mood. There's a crowd forming outside the local branch. The metal shutter is down. People are lined up anyway, like they're waiting for tickets to something scarce. At the supermarket, carts are piled with canned food, diapers, formula, bottled water. People are counting out worn bills. Nobody is using plastic. Neighbors who normally nod and move on are quietly asking each other, "How much cash do you have at home?" The TV behind the counter is blasting breaking news. The tone is calm, almost too calm. Officials urge the public to remain patient while the financial system undergoes emergency review. Analysts on air talk about liquidity stress, temporary controls, targeted stabilization. You're listening, but none of those phrases actually answer the only question that matters to you. Can I get my money? And then the realization hits, cold and simple. Your money is not where you thought it was. You always pictured it sitting in a protected account, waiting for you. Not anymore. Right now, what you call your balance is just an entry in someone else's database, a number on someone else's server, and that server has been walled off. For the moment, practically speaking, your money does not exist for you. Sounds like a dystopian thriller, right? The system freezes, panic spreads, normal life cracks. But this isn't fiction. It has happened before. Not in fantasy settings or failed states, but in modern countries that thought they were safe, civilized, stable. And when it happens, life doesn't politely slow down and give people time to adjust. It snaps. The rules about access, status, and survival change overnight. Argentina, 2001. After years of bad debt, political mishandling, and desperate borrowing, ordinary people started doing the rational thing, pulling pesos out of local banks, turning them into dollars, and moving those dollars anywhere safer than Argentina. Deposits drained, banks started bleeding, confidence collapsed. So the government slammed the doors. They called it the Corralito, the Little Corral. Cute name, brutal reality. Cash withdrawals were capped at a tiny weekly allowance. You couldn't freely move your own money. Accounts that people had kept in US dollars, because dollars felt safe, were forcibly converted to pesos. Then the peso was devalued. Savings that had taken a lifetime to build lost huge chunks of buying power in weeks. People banged pots and pans in the streets because that was the only way to be heard. Middle-class families who had seen themselves as stable woke up poor. That is what bank shutdown means in real life. It doesn't mean a chart on TV goes down. It means your grocery budget explodes. It means rent becomes a crisis. It means you can't pay employees or suppliers or tuition. The floor under you turns out not to be concrete. It's glass. Argentina is not unique. Cyprus, 2013. The country's banks were drowning in bad assets. A rescue deal was put together with European authorities. But the plan came with a twist. Depositors will participate. Translation, bank accounts were frozen, and balances above a certain level were raided to recapitalize the banks. Money that businesses needed for payroll, that families had saved for retirement or for their kids' college, was just taken. Imagine waking up to find that you've been forced to bail in the very institution that was supposed to protect you. Lebanon, 2019. After years of corruption and financial engineering that everyone pretended was sustainable, the system cracked. The local currency collapsed. Banks announced temporary capital controls, which is a polite way of saying you can't withdraw freely anymore. Limits were set so low that people effectively lost access to their own savings. Some depositors stormed bank branches with guns because at that point they weren't negotiating about interest rates. They were trying to pay for surgery, for food, for survival. And if you're thinking, okay, but that's over there, not here, pause. Because even the United States, the country that loves to say it can't happen here, has shut down its banking system by force. In March 1933, during the worst phase of the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt declared a nationwide bank holiday. It sounds cheerful, like a long weekend. It wasn't. It meant every bank in America had to close, all at once. Doors locked, no withdrawals, no transfers, no business access to payroll funds, no household access to savings. People were terrified. Only after emergency inspections did some banks reopen one by one, with the government vouching for them to restore confidence. In other words, the entire system had to be frozen just to keep it from ripping itself apart. That's the part that should make you sit up. One of the richest nations on earth had to freeze every bank in the country just to stop the system from eating itself. Different countries, different decades, same pattern. We tell ourselves that banks are basically vaults with polite customer service. We imagine our deposits sitting in a secure box, tagged with our name, waiting for pickup. That mental image is comforting. It's also wrong. Modern banks run on something called fractional reserves. Here's the simple version. You deposit $1,000. The bank does not store $1,000 with a sticky note that says, "For Olivia, do not touch." The bank keeps a small fraction and loans out the rest, to a business, to a home buyer, to the government. That loan money lands in someone else's account, which the bank also treats as a deposit, which can also be lent again. $1 echoes through the system until it behaves like 5 or 10. This is brilliant when times are calm. It fuels growth, credit, housing, consumption. Politicians point to rising numbers and call it prosperity, but it's also fragile by design. Because if enough depositors show up at once and say, "I want my original dollar back," the bank can't hand it over. The cash isn't sitting there. It's out in the world, working somewhere else. That's a bank run. It's not random hysteria. It's self-defense. It's people realizing all at once, if I don't get my money now, I may never get it. You don't need every customer to panic. You just need enough people to expose the thin layer of reserves. Once that thinness is visible, confidence dies. And once confidence dies, even basically healthy banks can topple in hours. Confidence is oxygen. Without it, the machine suffocates. Governments know this. Regulators know this. Bank executives definitely know this. Which is why, during a crisis, the first instinct is almost never let everyone withdraw what they're owed. The first instinct is freeze the exits before the building empties. In Argentina, withdrawal limits were sold as stability. In Cyprus, forced seizures of deposits were labeled necessary restructuring. In Lebanon, capital controls were presented as temporary protections. In the U.S. in 1933, a total shutdown was called a holiday. The branding changes. The core move doesn't. Access is cut off to stop collapse. Here's the part almost nobody is taught directly. Banks and governments are partners. Banks buy government debt and keep public spending alive. Governments, in return, write rules that let banks operate within reserves and huge leverage. When trouble hits, that alliance hardens. You are not in that alliance. You are the liability they are trying to contain. To keep you calm, they wrap this alliance in soothing promises. Take deposit insurance. In the United States, the FDIC says deposits up to a set limit are insured. That sounds like a safety net. And for a single bank failure here and there, it generally works because it keeps people from rushing the teller windows. But zoom out. Ask yourself something brutal. If everyone in the country tried to pull insured deposits at the same time, would the fund have anywhere near the money it needs? No. That guarantee works mostly as psychology. It's there to convince you not to sprint for the exit. Its main function is to prevent panic, not to survive panic. Now, zoom back to you, personally. Picture a shutdown lasting not hours but days. Payroll doesn't arrive. Your landlord refuses an online transfer and demands physical cash by tonight, or you're in violation. Your card gets declined at the gas station. You try to send money to your parents and the transfer just sits in pending. Your boss calls an emergency meeting. Until the bank issue is resolved, salaries are delayed. The grocery store is technically open, but shelves look thinner by the hour because suppliers aren't getting paid and trucks aren't moving. Factories pause because they can't pay for raw materials. Pharmacies start rationing medication because importers can't clear foreign payments. Weddings are postponed. Surgeries are postponed. Students are told tuition must be paid in full, in cash, or enrollment is frozen. This isn't Hollywood. Greece went through withdrawal caps in 2015, where ATMs rationed out only a small daily amount, and people waited in the heat for the privilege of accessing their own savings. All of this is happening in a world that is more digitally dependent than any previous generation. We barely use physical cash anymore. We auto-pay rent, tap phones at checkout, split dinner with instant transfers, and keep savings in accounts we never physically see. Convenience feels like safety because it's smooth. But convenience is concentration. When almost all money moves through a few giant banks, a few clearing systems, and a few payment networks, failure stops being local. Flip the wrong switch, or trigger the wrong emergency protocol, and tens of millions of people are frozen at the same moment. You don't even need a total collapse. You just need a coordinated pause. And here's the uncomfortable truth. That pause is legal. It already has names. Capital controls, liquidity management, temporary stabilization measures. These phrases sound harmless, technical, boring. In plain English, they mean you cannot move your own money the way you want to, when you want to. Cut off the flow, and everything downstream starts to starve. Workers don't get paid, so households stop spending. Households stop spending, so businesses slash costs. Businesses slash costs, so layoffs cascade. Layoffs kill demand, which strangles supply chains even more. Investors panic sell anything they can still sell, which wrecks pensions and retirement accounts. Fear builds. Streets fill. Police are deployed. Politicians go on TV and ask for calm while hinting at unprecedented steps. And underneath the fear sits something deeper. Betrayal. In Argentina, people yelled, "La plata es nuestra." The money is ours, because it was supposed to be. In Cyprus, ordinary savers watched years of careful discipline evaporate overnight to rescue institutions labeled too big to fail. In Lebanon, the banking crisis felt like the moment the social contract itself broke. Citizens realized their leaders had steered them into catastrophe and then locked the exits. In the United States, the memory of 1933 burned so deep that it changed how an entire generation thought about money. All those stories whisper the same message. Your money is yours, until the system decides it isn't. That number on your banking app feels like hard property. But in legal and practical terms, what you have at a bank is not a personal vault. It's an IOU. It's conditional access to purchasing power, provided the machine is functioning and chooses to honor you. The second the machine decides there is a bigger priority than you, stabilizing a currency, saving a bank, calming investors, preventing a run, your access can be delayed, rationed, taxed, devalued, or frozen. That's the part almost nobody prepares for. So, what do you actually do with this information? First, don't lunge into panic. Pulling every dollar and stuffing it into a mattress is not a plan. In many cases, behavior like that accelerates collapse and puts a target on you. Fear without strategy just makes you easier to control. The goal is not fear. The goal is resilience. Resilience means understanding the difference between I have theoretical wealth and I can actually use resources this week. It means having some emergency cash you can physically reach. It means not keeping every asset in the same institution, the same country, or the same currency. It means owning at least some things that aren't just digits on a bank server. Skills, tools, goods, land, precious metals, even a small reserve of essentials that lets you function if payment rails jam. Real wealth is not only what you've earned, Real wealth is what you can still access when the system is under stress. Second, learn the language of control. When you hear phrases like temporary withdrawal limits, stability operations, protective measures, or orderly resolution, translate them. They all mean the same thing. We're going to restrict your access to prevent wider panic, and we will frame it as being for your own good. The more fluent you are in that language, the harder it is to lull you. Third, remember, this is not only individual, it's collective. Rules improve when people refuse to quietly accept abuse. Deposit insurance, disclosure rules, oversight, none of that appeared because bankers felt generous. It came from pressure. Systems will always protect themselves first. If citizens don't push back, the pattern never changes. And finally, understand the real relationship. Banks, payment networks, and the governments behind them present themselves as neutral utilities, like electricity or running water. They are not neutral. They are gatekeepers. They decide who can transact, how fast, under what conditions, and with what penalties. As long as confidence holds, they look like friendly service providers. The second confidence cracks, the mask slips, and you see that access was never guaranteed. It was rented. History doesn't repeat perfectly, but it echoes. Argentina, Cyprus, Lebanon, Greece, the United States in 1933. The pattern is loud. Access is not ownership. Availability is not control. Digital convenience is not safety. So ask yourself honestly, if you woke up tomorrow and the switch had already been flipped, app frozen, ATM dark, card declined, how long could you keep operating without begging the very system that just locked you out? Because the question might not be, what if the banks shut down someday? The question might be, what do I do now that they already have? If that idea changes the way you think about money, stick around. We're going to keep pulling on this thread, because history leaves warnings, and those warnings may be the only advance notice you ever get.